Hello, students. Today we'll be looking at solving equations, again, that have fractions in them. Those are called rational equations, and we'll do a few applications. So these today are going to have more than one expression as the common denominator. I think I'll work on the common denominator first and then excluded values. So you have the most complicated of the three denominators is the one with the exponent, z squared minus 1. And that's a difference of two squares that will factor to z plus 1 times z minus 1. And that's actually what your other two denominators are. And so your least common denominator is the z plus 1 times z minus 1. So something to notice in this assignment, if you have three different denominators and your third one has a squared term, more than likely your common denominator is going to be the two that don't have the squared term just multiplied together. So we'll go ahead and work the problem out using that common denominator to clear the fraction. So we'll start with 2 over z plus 1 and multiply that by the common denominator of z plus 1 times z minus 1 over 1. And then we have the next fraction with a minus sign in front of it, minus 1 over z minus 1. And again, we'll multiply by the common denominator of z plus 1 times z minus 1 over 1. And then equals our last fraction, negative 2 over. And I'm going to go ahead and leave it as z squared minus 1. But we know that that is the same as z plus 1, z minus 1. So I'll multiply by that. Common denominator. So next we will cancel. So z plus 1's cancel. And so we have the 2 that will multiply by the remaining z minus 1. And then we have a minus 1. And canceling is z minus 1. And that minus 1 will multiply by the remaining z plus 1. And then we have your equals, negative 2. Now, the z squared minus 1 is the same as z plus 1, z minus 1. So all of that cancels, and we only have the negative 2. So we can do the distributive property 2z minus 2, and then we can do the distributive again, negative 1z minus 1, equaling negative 2. We have like terms on the same side of equals. So 2z minus 1z is 1z. And then we have the negative 2 and the negative 1. That'd be minus 3 equals negative 2. We can add 3 to both sides of the equal sign. And that will leave us with 1z equals 1. We can divide both sides by 1, giving us z equals 1. All right, now the other day we talked about excluded values. Those would be numbers that would make our denominators equal to 0. So we can look at z plus 1 equals 0. If we subtract 1 to both sides, We get z equals -1. We didn't get that, so we're okay. Let's try the other one. The other one is z minus 1 equals 0. Add 1 to both sides, and we get z equals 1. We did get that. Z is not allowed to be either -1 or +1. We got that, which is an excluded value. And so our answer is actually no solution. So no solution. And sometimes that does happen. All right, we'll move on to your second problem. I'm going to work this one in the same way, starting with my denominators, and I'm going to work on the one that has the squared term. So q squared plus 2q minus 8. Now, that is something that needs to be factored. And I'm just going to go back over factoring with you. A is 1, B is 2, C is -8. If we look at what would multiply to give us our AC, which is -8, and what would add so that B is 2. We could make a list of what multiplies to 8. It's just a couple of factors. 1 times 8, 2 times 4. If we make the 2 negative, we would get it to add to 2. So we'll have q squared minus 2q plus 4q minus 8. And if we divide out a q, we'll have q minus 2. If we divide out a 4, we'll also have q minus 2. And then our common factor would be the matching parentheses of q minus 2. And then the other factor would be q plus 4. Well, as I mentioned before, often it will be that fraction that has a q squared in the denominator, the common denominator will end up being your two factors that do not have the square term. And that's what happens on this. So your least common denominator is q minus 2 times q plus 4. So beginning our process again, I'll take 1 over q minus 2 and multiply that by the common denominator, q minus 2 times q plus 4 over 1. Then I have an equals. And then next fraction, 2q plus 1 over. And I'll just go ahead and leave this as q squared plus 2q minus 8. We'll multiply that by our common denominator again, q minus 2 times q plus 4 over 1. And then my third fraction, I have a plus sign, and then 2 over q plus 4. And I'm multiplying that by my common denominator again of q minus 2 and q plus 4 over 1. All right, so now we begin the canceling process. Q minus 2 cancels, and we'll have 1 that will distribute to q plus 4. Then we have your equal sign. So equals. All right. We discovered that q squared plus 2q minus 8 is equivalent to q minus 2 and q plus 4. So this all cancels. And you only have the denominator of 2q plus 1, or excuse me, the numerator. And then plus, and finally, we have the q plus 4 canceling. So we'll have a 2 that will distribute to q minus 2. All right, so now we'll do the distributive property. 1 times q plus 4 is q plus 4. We have 2q plus 1. And then we can distribute the 2 to 2q minus, and then 2 times 2, which gives us 4. So on the right-hand side of equals, 2q and 2q is 4q. 1 and negative 4 adds up to negative 3. We can subtract 4q to both sides of equals. That's negative 3q plus 4 equals negative 3. Then we have 4 that we can subtract to both sides. And so those cancel. That gives us negative 3q equals negative 7. And so I'm going to rewrite that. We can divide both sides by negative 3. Now we're going to get a fraction. And that sometimes happens. So q equals, the two negatives become a positive, but just leave the fraction. So we just need to see if we have a restricted value or an excluded value. Well, one denominator that we need to check is q minus 2. So q minus 2 equaling 0. We can add 2 to both sides and get q equals 2. So one excluded value is q cannot be 2. We can also check q plus 4 equals 0. We can subtract 4. And q equals negative 4 is another excluded value. Q cannot equal negative 4. Since 7/3 is not either one of those answers, 7/3 is our solution. Okay, we'll move on and look at problems that are applications. We have 2 types that we're going to take a look at. The first is those that involve rates. You can set up rates using a proportion, which is just a fraction, an equal sign, and a fraction, and then you can cross multiply. So here we have a camel can drink 15 gallons of water in 10 minutes. At this rate, how much water can the camel drink in 14 minutes? So your variable would be how much water. So x equals the amount of water. And then your equation, we could go 15 gallons. And if you want to put the units to help, in 10 minutes. And that would be equal to, now if we set up our fraction, we would want 14 minutes on the bottom. And we don't know how much water. That would be our variable, x gallons. So the equation that we're really working with is 15 over 10 equals x over 14. Now you can cross multiply these, taking 10x and 15 times 14, and 15 times 14 is 210. So this is cross multiplying. Then divide both sides by 10, and we get x equals 21. And that 21 would be gallons. And so then a sentence answer, the camel could drink 21 gallons in 14 minutes. We could leave it just at that. All right. I wanted to show you another rate problem that is just a little more complicated. Whenever you're having a problem involving rates that has some kind of force of nature working with it or against it, you'll have to add or subtract that force of nature's speed against or with the speed of the object. So in this case, we have a plane flying 440 miles with the wind and 340 miles against the wind in the same length of time. The speed of the wind is 25 miles per hour, and we are supposed to find the speed of the plane in still air. So x could equal the plane's speed in still air, and what we're looking for in the relationship for the equation is that the time against the wind was the same as the time with the wind. So against the wind, the plane was slowed down by the speed of the wind. So its regular speed actually was slower by 25 miles per hour, and that was the speed of the wind. And in that time, it traveled against the wind at 340 miles. All right. And then with the wind, the plane was helped along. It was speeded up by 25 miles per hour, and the plane was able to travel further with the wind at 440 miles. Now, this is still a proportion. You have a fraction, an equal sign, and a fraction. So this can still be solved by cross multiplying, or you can use the method that we've been using where you find the common denominator. But whenever you have just one fraction, an equal sign, and another fraction, actually cross multiplying is much easier. Now we would need to put the expressions in parentheses so that when you cross multiply, taking 340 times the expression x plus 25, remember to put your equal sign, and then take 440 times your expression with x minus 25. And then we can distribute. So 340x plus, and 340 times 25. If you need a calculator to do that, you can do that. So 340 times 25 is 8,500. So write that in. equals, and then we can take 440x minus, and you can calculate 440 times 25. That's going to be 11,000. Whoops. And now we're going to solve this equation. We want to get our x's on the same side of equal sign, so I'm going to minus 440x to both sides. I'm going to have to do the work up here then. So 340 minus 440, that would be negative 100x minus or plus 8,500 equals, and then negative 11,000. I can subtract 8,500 to both sides of the equal sign. This is going to give me negative 100x equals negative, and then these will add together to give me 19,500. I can divide both sides by negative 100, and x is going to equal 195. Now, the answer to the question then is the speed of the plane is 195 miles per hour. And that would be without any wind. So again, we solved for what happens if it's flying against the wind, where the wind is slowing it down. So I subtracted, and what happens with the wind. So the wind was making it go faster, so I added that. All right. And then the second type of problem we have would be problems involving work. So you'll often have 2 or 3 individual either machines or people that are doing a job in a certain amount of time, and be asked to compare that to what would happen if those machines or people all worked together. So in this third example, you have an experienced bricklayer can construct a small wall in 3 hours. An apprentice, that would be somebody just learning, can complete the job in 6 hours. So it would take them longer naturally. So you're asked to find how long it takes if they work together. And so that's the variable description, would be the length of time working together. And I have a formula that I've highlighted in yellow for us to use with work problems. So you find your first individual. In this case, it's the experienced bricklayer. And the experienced bricklayer takes 3 hours. So that's my first fraction, 1/3, plus. Then I find my second individual, the apprentice, takes 6 hours, so 1/6. And I would just keep doing that until I ran out of either machines or people, which is what's happened here. So I'll go on to, after the equal sign, it would be 1/, their time working together, which is x. All right, now this one is not a proportion. I have more than one fraction. So I've got to go back to my other method, which is to find my LCD. So my least common denominator, well, 6 is actually a common denominator for 3 and 6, but I also have the x. So I'm going to have the 6 times the x. Now, if you used 18x, that would also work. but 6x is your lowest common denominator. So we'll use 6x over 1. We're going to take that first of all times your 1/3. So 1/3 times that 6x over 1 plus, and then we'll go 1/6. Multiply that by 6x over 1, and then equals 1 over x, and we'll multiply that by 6x over 1. So this is the method we've been using on the last couple of lessons. So you can cancel. 3 will divide into 6 2 times. So we'll have 2x plus, then the 6's cancel, and so we'll have 1x equaling, and then here the x's cancel, and so we get 6. So that equation becomes 2x plus 1x, making 3x equaling 6, and we can divide by 3 and get x equals 2. And so it says sentence answer, so it would take 2 hours working together, which is shorter than it would either one of them individually. And so those are your two main types of this type of fraction equation. So your homework is on Math Excel. Use these examples to help you, and be sure to remember to ask questions.